talked with a friend of mine last week. Ben was in London as a part of his final year in graduate school, working on his training to become a professional actor. He's back in North Carolina now due to COVID-19. After catching up, Ben began revealing his anger, his pain and frustration with all the latest killings of Black people in our country. He shared things we'd never talked about before. My father is a retired FBI agent, Ben said. I love him and have so much respect for him. He's smart, honest, responsible, and brave. He'll tell you what he thinks when the moment calls for it. He can pass by a scene and tell you what each person was wearing, the color of their clothing, their height, weight. He sees all the details, and he does it all in such a calm way. We're so different, Ben said. Now me, I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch, and my emotions are right there on my sleeve if I'm not careful. That's why I didn't want to talk with you when you called right after George Floyd was murdered. I knew I'd explode. Then Ben told me a story about a lesson his dad taught him when he was a little boy. I was 6 and my father took us out to eat at McDonald's. I'd eaten my burger and my fries and was all set to really get into my drink. As I reached for it, Dad took the drink, held it up over the floor, and slammed it down. I was livid, screaming, crying. Dad took me firmly by his hands and said in that quiet, intense voice of his, "Stop yelling and crying. Calm yourself down. You have to learn how not to get upset when you're in public." He reinforced that idea over and over while I was growing up, along with having the talk and everything else he believed I needed to know to survive. And the thing is, I've been somebody who's always followed the rules since then. I may not understand the nuances of situations, but I've always made sure to understand the rules and follow them. When Black people were enslaved in America, they found places called brush arbors, safe havens hidden in the woods where they would steal away to pray, encourage one another, enact rites of passage, plot their freedom. In the sanctuary of the forest, the disinherited and oppressed offered all they had to give in the collective work of loving themselves and the very essence of their humanity. Where are the sanctuaries for Black people in today's America? Where can they go to be free, to breathe, to laugh, to love and be loved, and be human without the fears and threats of being harmed? The answer has largely been the Black church. On a Wednesday evening in June of 2015 in Charleston, South Carolina, Dylan Roof sat close to DePayne v. Middleton, a minister, a devoted mother, and brilliant vocalist. Dep, as folks called her, was among the 9 parishioners the self-proclaimed white supremacist murdered as the group gathered for Bible study in the historic Emmanuel AME Church in downtown Charleston. Mother Emmanuel is steps away from the old citadel in one direction, and the old port and market in the other, which profited from human cargo. Denmark Vesey, a revolutionary abolitionist, was also a member of Emmanuel. In rebellion to white supremacy, he mobilized other enslaved people to resist and fight back. Vesey and others were killed, and the original church building was burned down by an angry mob. The congregation holds a deep awareness of its heritage, and hospitality and love remain deep at its core. So on that night, when a stranger entered the people's midst, they offered one of the humblest and most beautiful offerings one can extend to a stranger: a seat at the table. When he entered the room, they didn't stereotype him. They didn't presume he was a threat because he was white. He was welcome to join in worship, prayer, and fellowship. He was treated as a guest. Depp reportedly shared a Bible with Roof, and as a result was one of the first to be murdered. The inconceivable grief her children, parents, and siblings would bear, and still do 5 years later, would soon be lost in the forced narratives of forgiveness perpetuated by the media, by politicians, even by the church, which was perhaps mesmerized by the spotlight or pressured to follow the script created for well-behaved black folks who say they love Jesus. Depp didn't get to go home to her 4 daughters that night. They didn't get to have one last dinner with their mother. But Roof, who stated that he wanted to start a race war, was taken to Burger King by police officers before he was even taken to jail. Depp, along with 8 other African Americans, friends, neighbors, parishioners, laid dead on the floor of the church, her family waiting to claim her body as they mourned for her, while Roof, in his white privilege, received the courtesy of a free meal. It was reminiscent of that horrible Sunday morning on September 15th, 1963, when Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Addie Mae Collins, ages 11 to 14, were killed in the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. What happened at Mother Emanuel was not new to America. It was merely an extension of centuries ago back in Ghana, where chapels were built in the heart of slave castles, so that slaves could be christened before being sold and shackled on slave ships. Imagine being beaten, raped, stolen away from your land, subjected to agonizing suffering, and then having your captors christen you in a chapel inside a slave castle. 5 years ago, when domestic terror traumatized a church, a culture, and community, the resonance of America's past was exposed. The insistence on a narrative of the family forgives created a missed opportunity for a time of deeper truth-telling, reconciliation, and healing. How do you promote a narrative of forgiveness while ignoring the very roots of racism that perpetuated such horror? There's nothing wrong with being committed to love and hospitality, to welcoming the stranger into our midst, to extending a seat to join us at the table, while also maintaining the right to be angry, to righteously resist the violence against humanity. To insist on a narrative of forgiveness is dehumanizing and violent. It goes against the very nature of lament. As Christians, we celebrate the donning of ashes and sackcloth as an act of lamentation and mourning. So why deny families in a watershed moment of grief this right to lament for as long as they need to? Deb's family didn't offer forgiveness in the courtroom when Roof went on trial. And in the end, it became a marketable story made for television and for profit, for pulpits and for politics, in order to ease the guilt of white supremacy and remove accountability. In the rush to force this false narrative, our society failed to truly engage dialogue on race, racism, and the violence that targets Black and brown bodies. The true story is that Depp's murder left her family broken, distraught, depressed, bewildered. 4 daughters will forever now find their way in this world without the physical presence and loving guidance of their mother. With every milestone they achieve, they will bear the sting of Depp's absence. This is their truth now. Her grieving mother staring down the front door each time it opens, still hoping that somehow her daughter will walk through it. Her father, with failing eyesight, trying to climb onto the roof to repair his home because it was the last project he and his daughter promised each other they would take on together. A baby sister, inconsolable without her closest friend, now tasked with raising her 4 nieces alongside her own children. I don't think even President Obama considered the implications when he sang Amazing Grace during his eulogy for Mother Emanuel pastor and South Carolina State Senator Clementa Pinckney, with AME bishops and pastors applauding in the background, too easily obliged to showcase the soft and non-threatening narratives the media sought. The image, the song, the occasion, and the powerful impact of the president's presence pushed the narrative further, moving things farther away from a chance to make this moment about addressing racism instead of about the alleged acquiescence of Black folks. It was a moment that called not for convenience, but for the inconvenience of truth-telling. It was the moment in the global spotlight to expose the sins of this country, the sins of those who played politics with the loss, and even the sins of the church. There is a role for the Church Universal in this time, to link arms and refuse to look away, to face the painful reality that people of color continue to face. That question, where are the safe havens for Black and brown bodies in America? Perhaps that was the question that gave birth to a poet's lament, the song Strange Fruit. Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. The Billie Holiday song was penned by a Jewish man named Abel Maripol. He wrote the words after he saw photos of a lynching party with white people smiling, posing for the camera. The imagery was so appalling and reprehensible to Maripol that he was moved to write Strange Fruit, which was later set to music. Holiday reportedly insisted on closing her sets by having the house lights dimmed as she echoed those haunting lyrics to her audience. Maripol and Holiday offered their gifts, talents, and platforms as tools to inspire change. They understood the power of their privilege and location, and they used it. One used a pen, and the other a microphone. But the message was clear. We all share the responsibility to dismantle racism in America and in the world. Last year, when filmmakers and celebrities produced a film to tell the story of Mother Emanuel, Depp's cousin, Waltrina Middleton, participated with the hope of sharing her family's point of view. But their voices were nearly shut out. The interview she gave was reduced to sound bites that could not capture the weight of her heart's lament. Middleton later said, "While many people celebrated the film, for me it opened wounds, brought me back to 2015, when the world told Black people and the Black church that they didn't have a right to be angry. Forgiveness remained the storyline, with racism nothing but a hidden note." The Black church has endured a painful legacy of suffering in what has been called the Great Maafa, the African Holocaust, which brought them against their will on slave ships. They remain resilient and steadfast, but this doesn't mean they don't also hurt. Everything Black people need to overcome systems of oppression and restore their lives is within them, but they must be free. They must be free to tell their own stories, speak their truths, and cry out with rage and sorrow. Lamenting does not make people less Christian. It affirms our humanity. It rejects the moral injuries that plague our society. Lament draws us closer to Jesus Christ, who also lamented. So have no fear of them, Jesus says, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from God. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Sankofa is a word in the Twi language of Ghana. It's represented by a bird with its head turned backwards, while its feet face forward, carrying a precious egg in its mouth. Sankofa is often associated with an African proverb which translates as, "It is not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten." It symbolizes taking from the past what is good and bringing it into the present in order to make change through the use of knowledge. I will call to mind the deeds of God, writes the psalmist. I will remember your wonders of old. With your strong arm you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. Ben finished our conversation that night by saying, Mike, my aunt is dying. She's been like a mother to me. She was born a few years before the Little Rock Nine, before Emmett Till and Rosa Parks. Over 70 years of life. And here at the end, we've got George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all the others. She will have never lived when black people weren't being killed. Never lived when black people weren't being killed. And I've got a little nephew, Ezra. His dad is dead and my sister's raising him alone. They're staying with us now, Dad and me. I don't want him to finish at the end of his life with the same circumstances as my aunt. I'm going to finish school when the virus is over, and I'm going to use my art, my voice to help change some of this stuff. I'm going to use the things my aunt and my dad have taught me. They've both said their faith taught them to live for other people. And it's time for me to start doing that. I'm going to help my sister teach Ezra. We're going to help him find out who he is and what he wants. We're going to make it better for him and all the other kids like him. I'll still get angry, but I'm not going to apologize about it. I'm just going to keep working at it. I'm not going to be quiet about this any longer. There'll be people who get defensive and say I'm overreacting. That's okay. We're fighting for hope and love. We're fighting to live. This world, as black folks experience it, it just isn't the world as it's supposed to be. So I'll keep working at it. And I think this COVID thing has given me the time to realize I'm really not afraid anymore about what others think. I'm afraid of living my life as if it depends just on me. and that I'm not living for anybody else. So what do you think, Mike? How does that sound? Let it be so, Ben. Let it be so. Let it be so, my friend. Let it be so. Thanks be to God.